Sign it, and your mother lives.
This isn't a payment form.
No, it's your confession. Pride is expensive, Elara. Your mother can't afford yours.
Move Miriam Voss into surgery.
Sir, the account was denied.
Then charge mine. Who are you? Someone who remembers being erased.
Sign this, and your mother goes into surgery tonight. Elara Voss stared at the paper Dorian Blackwell had placed on the marble reception counter. It was not a payment form. It was a confession. If she signed it, she would admit she had lied about the insurance fraud she once discovered inside Blackwell Assurance. If she refused, her mother would be removed from the surgical list before midnight. Behind the glass doors of the intensive care wing, Miriam Voss lay unconscious beneath pale hospital lights. Her mother had spent 31 years as a nurse saving strangers. Now the hospital was letting her die because she could not afford to matter. Dorian slid a silver pen toward Elara. "Pride is expensive, Elara," he said. "Your mother cannot afford yours." Elara looked at the pen, then at her mother, then at the confession that would bury every patient Blackwell Assurance had ever denied. Her fingers closed around it. Across the lobby, a man in a dark security jacket stopped walking. Cassian Vale had entered Meridian St. Hospital that night to inspect a quiet financial leak inside the hospital network. He had not expected to see a woman being blackmailed at the front desk. He had not expected to see Dorian Blackwell, and he had not expected to see the old blue hospital bracelet around Elara Voss's wrist, faded, cracked at the edge, too old to belong to anyone in that hospital lobby. Cassian's face changed. 12 years disappeared from his eyes. It was not the same bracelet he had kept for 12 years. It was its twin, the other half of the only proof that someone had once believed he was worth saving. He was no longer the invisible owner of Vale Meridian Health. He was a hungry orphan again, standing in a charity school hallway while rich adults called him a thief. And Elara Voss was 15 again, standing between him and the people who wanted him erased. There had been 2 blue hospital bracelets that night. Elara had taken them from an empty nurse's cart after the adults refused to write his name on any report. On one, she wrote Cass. On the other, she wrote Elara. Then she pressed his bracelet into his hand and kept the second one around her own wrist. "When they say you are no one," she had whispered, "remember someone wrote your name down." Cassian had kept that memory for 12 years, and now the girl who had given him a name was about to sign away hers. He stepped forward. "Move Miriam Voss into surgery," he said. The receptionist looked up. "Sir, the account has been denied." Cassian placed a black card on the counter. "Then charge mine." The receptionist hesitated. Dorian turned slowly. His eyes moved from the card to Cassian's face. "And who are you supposed to be?" Cassian did not answer him. He looked only at Elara. "Someone who remembers what it feels like when no one signs for you." The card was processed. Approved. The receptionist went pale. Within seconds, phones rang, nurses moved, a surgeon was called back. Miriam Voss was restored to the surgical list. Elara stared at the stranger. Dorian stared at the card. And for the first time that night, the man who had been smiling over a dying woman looked afraid. Not angry, not offended, afraid. Because powerful men do not fear kindness. They fear kindness backed by money they cannot control. Elara did not know it yet, but the stranger who had just saved her mother was not merely rich. He owned the hospital that had tried to let her die. And before sunrise, that secret would begin destroying everyone who had hidden behind its walls. Only after the surgical doors closed did Elara allow herself to breathe. Her knees almost failed. She leaned against the wall and pressed one hand to her mouth. The other hand touched the old blue bracelet around her wrist. She did not know why she had worn it that night. Most days, it stayed inside a small box in her apartment, hidden beneath expired clinic badges, old letters, and photographs she never looked at for too long. But that morning, before bringing her mother to the hospital, Elara had found herself fastening it around her wrist, as if some part of her remembered danger before the rest of her understood it. Across the corridor, Cassian Vale watched her touch the bracelet. His own wrist felt empty. For 12 years, he had carried the other bracelet in his wallet, folded behind a photograph of the first hospital he had ever bought. One bracelet proved he had once been saved. The other proved she had never stopped believing people deserved names before they deserved approval. Elara looked up and caught him staring. "Why are you looking at my bracelet like that?" she asked. Cassian went still. For a moment, the hospital noise seemed to disappear between them. "Because I have seen one like it before," he said. "Where?" His voice lowered. "In the hand of a boy who had nothing else." Elara's breath caught. The words opened something in her memory. A hallway, a nurse's cart, a crying boy with bruised knuckles, adults speaking above him as if he were already guilty. But before the memory could become whole, Dorian crossed the lobby. His expression had recovered into something smooth and poisonous. "Elara," he said. "A word," she turned. "You already had one. It was blackmail." Dorian smiled with only one corner of his mouth. "Careful. Emotional women sound unstable when there are witnesses." Cassian's gaze sharpened. But Elara raised a hand before he could step in. Men like Dorian preferred women who either begged or exploded. Begging made them feel merciful. Anger made them feel justified. So, she gave him neither. "You brought a false confession to a hospital," she said, "while my mother was being denied emergency surgery." Dorian leaned closer. "And you almost signed it." The words landed exactly where he intended. Because he was right. For one terrible minute, Elara had almost done it. She had almost buried the truth to save the only family she had left. Dorian knew it. That was why he smiled again. "You see, Elara, that is the difference between you and me. I understand what people are worth under pressure." "No," she said. "You understand what they cost." The smile faded. Dorian glanced at Cassian. "You should be careful whose charity you accept. Men do not appear in hospital lobbies with black cards because they are saints." Cassian's voice was quiet. "Leave," Dorian laughed. "This is not your conversation. It is now." Something in Cassian's tone changed the air. Dorian studied him more carefully. For the first time, he seemed uncertain. Then he adjusted his cufflinks, stepped back, and looked at Elara. "This is not over." Elara met his eyes. "No, it finally started." Dorian walked away. But at the elevator, he stopped and made a call. Elara could not hear the words. She did not need to. By the time the elevator doors closed, she understood one thing with absolute clarity. Her mother's denial had not been a mistake. It had been a warning. And warnings only came when someone had something bigger to hide. Miriam's surgery lasted 4 hours and 37 minutes. Elara counted every one of them. She sat in the waiting room with cold coffee untouched in her hands, replaying the last 2 years of her life like evidence on a table. The first suspicious file had appeared when she still worked at a small community clinic on the east side of the city. A patient had been denied coverage for a transplant consultation because of something called charity risk escalation. The phrase made no sense. Charity was not supposed to create risk. Disease did. Poverty did. Delay did. But in the Blackwell assurance system, patients without financial leverage were not people. They were exposure, liability, a bad investment. Elara had flagged the case, then another, then 12. She sent questions up the administrative chain. She asked why patients approved by doctors were suddenly reclassified by insurance reviewers. She asked why grants from the Meridian Relief Foundation disappeared before reaching the patients they were assigned to support. 3 weeks later, she was fired. 1 month later, Dorian Blackwell, her fiancé at the time, told her she was confused, exhausted, and embarrassing herself. 2 months later, he ended their engagement, not privately, at a charity luncheon, in front of donors, in front of board members, in front of Serafina Cross, the elegant daughter of a philanthropic dynasty who had smiled at Elara as if she were watching a stain being removed from silk. The official reason was incompatibility. The real reason was documents. Elara had seen too much. And now her mother was paying for it. At 3:18 in the morning, the surgeon entered the waiting room. Elara stood so fast the coffee spilled across her hands. "She made it," he said. The words hit her knees before they reached her heart. She sat down, covered her mouth, and cried without sound. The surgeon explained things slowly. The operation had been difficult, but successful. Miriam would need monitoring, medication, follow-up treatment, and time. Time. The one thing money had almost stolen. When the surgeon left, Elara looked around for the stranger. He was gone. But on the chair beside her was a folded piece of paper. No name, no signature. Only one sentence written in black ink. "Do not sign anything Dorian gives you." Elara stared at it, then turned it over. On the back was a phone number. For a long time, she did not move. Then she folded the paper and placed it in her coat pocket. She told herself she would not call him. She told herself she did not need another powerful man deciding when to appear and when to disappear. She told herself gratitude was not trust. But when dawn broke over the hospital windows and her mother was still alive, Elara touched the paper in her pocket like it was a pulse. And somewhere on the top floor of the same hospital, Cassian Vale watched security footage of Dorian Blackwell entering the records department at 2:41 a.m. Dorian had not come back for Elara. He had come back for files, and that meant the hospital denial was only the surface. The next morning, Miriam Voss opened her eyes. Elara stood so quickly the chair scraped the floor. "Mom?" Miriam blinked against the pale light. For a moment, she looked confused. Then her eyes drifted to Elara's wrist, to the old blue bracelet. Her face changed. "You still wear it," Miriam whispered. Elara looked down. "I never knew why I couldn't throw it away." Miriam's eyes filled with something too old to be only memory. "Because some names become promises." Elara's breath caught. "What does that mean?" Miriam turned her face toward the window. "He came back, didn't he?" Elara froze. "Who?" Miriam closed her eyes. "The boy with the other bracelet." The room went silent. Elara looked at the faded plastic around her wrist. For years, she had remembered only fragments: a hallway, a stolen medical card, a crying boy, a name written in blue ink. But now the stranger's words returned to her. Someone who remembers what it feels like when no one signs for you. Elara stepped closer to the bed. "Mom," she whispered. "Who was he?" Miriam's lips trembled. "The first person you saved before you knew saving people would cost you." Then the medication pulled her under again, and Elara was left staring at the bracelet as if it had become a door. She walked into the hallway, pulled the folded note from her pocket, and called the number. He answered on the second ring. "Elara." She hated the way her name sounded in his voice, as if he had said it before, as if he had waited years to say it again. "I want answers," she said. "You deserve them. That is not the same as giving them." A pause. "No," he said. "It is not. Who are you?" "My name is Cass." "Cass what?" Another pause. "Vale." The name meant nothing to her. Not yet. "What do you do?" Cass Vale. "I investigate problems inside hospitals." That sounds intentionally vague. It is. "Why did you look at my bracelet like that?" Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. That frightened her more. "Cass?" His voice came back quieter. Because I have seen one like it before. Where? In the hand of a boy who had nothing else. Elara looked down at the faded blue plastic around her wrist. The ink on the back was almost gone. Elara, a name written by her own teenage hand. Who was he? She asked. Cassian did not answer immediately. Then he said, someone who spent 12 years trying to become powerful enough that no one could ever erase him again. The hallway seemed to tilt. What does that have to do with my mother? His voice changed, became colder. Last night, after your mother went into surgery, Dorian Blackwell broke into a restricted archive and deleted 7 patient review files. Elara's hand tightened around the phone. Why would he do that? Because one of them had your mother's name on it. Her blood turned cold. Cassian continued. And another had yours. Elara met Cassian 2 hours later in the hospital chapel. Not because she trusted him, because chapels had no security cameras facing the pews. Her mother had taught her that. People confess differently when they think, God is the only witness, Miriam used to say. Cassian was already there when she arrived. He had changed out of the security jacket and into a charcoal suit. He looked less like an employee now and more like a man pretending not to be dangerous. Elara sat 2 pews away. Start talking. Cassian did not object to the distance. Blackwell Assurance has been using a denial category called charity risk escalation to block expensive treatment for patients assigned to foundation support. I know that. You found it 2 years ago. Yes. You reported it internally. Yes. Then your engagement ended, your job disappeared, and your mother's medical review was transferred from standard approval to charity risk denial. Elara's throat tightened. How long have you been investigating this? Long enough to know your mother was not denied by accident. Why are you involved? Cassian looked toward the stained glass window. Colored light cut across his face. Because Meridian Relief, foundation money was supposed to protect those patients. And someone redirected it through consulting contracts tied to Blackwell subsidiaries. Elara absorbed that. The words were clinical. The meaning was not. Children denied treatment. Elderly patients removed from lists. Families told there was no funding while money moved through polished accounts and private dinners. How much? She asked. At least $46 million. Elara laughed once. Not because it was funny, because the number was too large for the small griefs it had created. $46 million sounded like skyscrapers, private jets, gala tables, champagne pyramids. But Elara saw a mother begging at a clinic window. A boy with leukemia waiting 3 months for approval. A retired nurse almost removed from surgery because she had no one powerful enough to insist she lived. What do you want me to do? She asked. Cassian turned to her. Help me prove the pattern. No. He studied her. No? I already tried to tell the truth. It cost me my job, my reputation, my engagement, and almost my mother. So, no, Mr. Vale, I will not become your tragic little witness. That is not what I am asking. Then what are you asking? I am asking you to do what you already know how to do better than anyone in that building. And what is that? Read the cruelty hidden inside paperwork. Elara looked away. That landed too close to pride. And pride, despite Dorian's insult, was one of the few things she had left. Cassian reached into his coat and placed a folder on the pew between them. These are anonymized patient denials. No names, no protected medical details, just codes, dates, departments, and approval chains. Elara did not touch it. If I open that, I am involved. You already are. Because of my mother? Because Dorian put your name into the audit trail. Her head snapped toward him. What? Cassian's eyes darkened. He is preparing to blame you. The chapel became too quiet. He deleted files last night, Cassian said. But before he did, someone inserted your old employee credentials into the archive access history. Elara whispered, I have not worked there in 2 years. I know. Can you prove that? Not yet. The honesty was worse than comfort. Elara stared at the folder. There it was. The trap. Dorian had not only tried to silence her, he had tried to turn her into the criminal before she could speak. And suddenly, the decision was no longer whether to fight. It was whether to fight blind. She took the folder. Cassian watched her fingers close over it. You should know something, he said. Once you start, they will not just attack your credibility. Elara stood. They already did. They will attack your mother. They already did. They will attack your past. She looked down at him. Then I hope they spell my name correctly. Cassian almost smiled. Almost. And in that almost, Elara felt something dangerous begin. Not trust, not affection, recognition. As if some part of her had known him before the rest of her could remember why. 3 days later, Elara walked into the Meridian Relief Foundation wearing the only black blazer she owned and shoes that pinched hard enough to keep her angry. Cassian had not given her a job. That was one thing she respected. He had arranged for her to be included in an open review selection for a temporary patient advocacy position. 5 candidates, 3 board observers, 1 practical interview, no guarantees, no private favors, no mercy. Elara preferred it that way. The foundation occupied the top floors of a glass tower connected to the hospital by a private bridge. Everything inside smelled expensive. White orchids, polished wood, filtered air, wealth pretending to be cleanliness. At reception, a woman looked at Elara's borrowed blazer and said, The service elevators are down the hall. Elara smiled. Wonderful. You can take them when you leave. The woman blinked. Before she could respond, a door opened. Serafina Cross stepped out. She was exactly as Elara remembered her. Elegant, immaculate, cruel in a way that had been educated into softness. Her cream suit probably cost more than Elara's rent. Her pearls were simple enough to be inherited and expensive enough to be weaponized. Elara Voss, Serafina said, I heard you were back in circulation. I heard you were still confusing charity with applause. A flicker moved behind Serafina's eyes. Then she smiled. I see poverty has not improved your manners. No, Elara said, but it has made my hearing excellent. I can hear contempt even when it wears perfume. One of the board observers coughed behind a folder. Serafina's smile sharpened. You are here for the advocacy review? Yes. How brave. How nervous that makes you. For 1 second, the mask slipped. Then Serafina turned to the room. Shall we begin? The practical interview was supposed to be simple. Each candidate received a mock case file and 10 minutes to identify missing documentation. The others looked for errors. Elara looked for design. Because bureaucracy had a scent when it was built to punish. The patient was a 7-year-old boy needing reconstructive surgery after a household accident. His treatment had been delayed twice because the foundation required a hospital release form before authorizing funds. But the hospital would not issue the release form until the foundation authorized funds. A perfect circle, legal on paper, deadly in practice. When her turn came, Serafina leaned back. Miss Voss, what seems to be missing? Elara looked at the file. Nothing. Serafina's eyebrows rose. Nothing? The file is complete. One of the observers frowned. Then why was the patient denied? Because the denial was designed before the file was reviewed. Silence. Elara turned the page and pointed to the sequence of timestamps. The foundation requested Form 19B at 8:12 a.m. The hospital marked Form 19B unavailable at 8:13. The denial was issued at 8:14. No human reviewer examined this file in 2 minutes. She turned another page. Also, Form 19B only applies after discharge. This child was never discharged. Whoever requested it knew the mother could not provide it. Serafina's expression cooled. Elara looked directly at the board. This is not a missing document. It is a document they know she cannot get without a hospital release. Someone designed this denial to look legal. The room changed. Cassian was standing at the back. Elara had not seen him enter. His face revealed nothing, but his eyes did. Pride, quiet, dangerous. Serafina noticed the look and followed it to Elara. That was the moment she understood Elara was not merely an inconvenience. She was a threat. And threats, in Serafina Cross's world, were not debated. They were destroyed. Elara got the position. Temporary patient review consultant. No corner office. No salary impressive enough to forgive the insult of the title. But access. Real access. For the first time in 2 years, Elara could see the machinery from inside the house. By the end of the first week, she had found 17 denials connected by the same review marker, CBR, charity-based risk. The system claimed it was an administrative classification. Elara knew better. CBR meant poor. CBR meant expensive. CBR meant unlikely to sue. A mechanic waiting for a transplant evaluation. A teenage girl removed from a cardiac trial. A cleaner with ovarian cancer whose grant had been temporarily deferred until she died. Each case carried a different name, a different doctor, a different medical tragedy, but the same hidden signature appeared in the escalation history. Blackwell Assurance Review. Elara printed nothing. She knew better. Printers had logs. She took notes by hand in a cheap spiral notebook and wrote names as initials, dates as patterns, codes as shapes. Her mother used to say Elara had learned bureaucracy before algebra. That week, she proved it. At night, Cassian worked in the archive room across from her. He did not hover. He did not rescue. He brought coffee, asked precise questions, and listened when she answered. That was more seductive than charm. Charm wanted applause. Listening wanted truth. On the fourth night, rain struck the windows hard enough to blur the city. Elara sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by files. Cassian stood by the table, reading an old audit report. "You do know chairs exist," he said. "Chairs are for people who still believe systems are built upright." He glanced at the floor. "And what are systems built on?" Elara lifted a file. "Bodies." His expression changed. Not shock. Agreement. That disturbed her more. "You have seen this before," she said. Cassian did not answer immediately. "Yes." "Where?" "Everywhere money learns to speak softly." Elara studied him. There was too much behind him. Too much discipline. Too much grief hidden under perfect control. "What did Blackwell do to you?" she asked. Cassian closed the report. "Not everything is about Blackwell." "No, but your voice changes when you say the name." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "When I was a boy, someone accused me of stealing medicine." Elara's hand stilled. "Did you?" "No." "Who accused you?" "A director at a charity institution. Blackwell was one of the donors." Something inside Elara moved. A memory, but not complete. A hallway, a nurse's cart, a crying boy, a blue bracelet. Before she could reach it, Cassian looked away. People believed them because hungry children are easy to accuse. Elara's voice softened despite herself. "What happened?" "Someone stood up for me." The room went quiet. "Who?" Cassian looked at her. But before he could answer, the lights flickered. The archive computer shut down. Then every screen in the room went black. Elara stood. Cassian took out his phone. No signal. A second later, the emergency lights turned red. From the hallway came the sound of footsteps. Not security. Too many. Cassian moved toward the door. Elara grabbed her notebook from the floor. He looked back. "Stay behind me." She stared at him. "I am not one of your files." No, he said. You are why they came. The door handle turned, then stopped. A white envelope slid beneath it. Cassian picked it up. Inside was a single photograph. Elara entering the archive room. On the back, someone had written, "Thieves always return to the scene." Elara's blood went cold. Dorian had made his next move. And this time, he was not trying to silence her. He was building a case. The investigation against Elara began the next morning. Not officially. Powerful people rarely begin with official attacks. They begin with whispers. A compliance officer asked why her access badge had appeared near restricted files. A Foundation assistant stopped speaking when Elara entered the break room. A board memo mentioned concerns regarding consultant objectivity. By noon, an anonymous social account had posted that a former clinic employee fired for misconduct had infiltrated Meridian Relief after becoming personally involved with a hospital executive. By evening, her landlord emailed about an unexpected inspection. Dorian was not just attacking her job. He was tightening every wall around her. Elara stood in the Foundation bathroom, gripping the sink until her knuckles whitened. For 1 minute, she allowed herself to shake. Only one. Then she washed her hands, fixed her lipstick with her finger, and walked back out. Serafina was waiting near the elevator. "Difficult day?" she asked. Elara pressed the button. "I have had worse." "Yes, I imagine public disgrace becomes easier with practice." The elevator opened. Elara stepped inside. Serafina followed. The doors closed. For 12 floors, it was just the two of them and their reflections in mirrored steel. Serafina tilted her head. "I am going to give you advice because I am feeling charitable. That must be exhausting for you. Leave before this becomes uglier." Elara looked at her reflection. Uglier than denying surgeries to poor patients? Serafina did not flinch. "Do not pretend you care about them more than you care about revenge. I can do both." That got to her. Serafina stepped closer. "Women like you always confuse rescue with romance." Elara turned. "And women like you confuse charity with applause." The elevator stopped. The doors opened to the gala preparation floor, where staff arranged flowers for the Meridian Winter Benefit. Dozens of people looked up. Serafina's eyes glittered. Then she did something small, elegant, and vicious. She loosened the clasp of her diamond bracelet, let it fall, and gasped. "My bracelet!" Every head turned. The bracelet lay near Elara's shoe. Serafina stared at it, then at Elara. "You really should check your pockets." The room froze. A staff member whispered. Someone lifted a phone. Elara understood instantly. A cheap trick. But cheap tricks worked when expensive people performed them. Cassian appeared at the far end of the room. His face darkened when he saw the bracelet on the floor. He started forward. Elara caught his eye and gave the smallest shake of her head. "No, let her finish. People like her confess better when they think they are winning." Elara bent slowly and picked up the bracelet with 2 fingers. Then she smiled. "Beautiful piece." Serafina extended her hand. "Return it." "In a moment." Gasps moved through the room. Elara turned the bracelet over. "May I ask why the clasp is already open?" Serafina's expression sharpened. It fell. Diamond tennis bracelets do not usually fall with the clasp manually, released. A man from the event staff glanced at Serafina. Elara continued. "Also, this room has 4 cameras, one above the service entrance, one near the bar, one by the south column, one directly above us." Serafina's jaw tightened. Elara handed the bracelet to the nearest security guard. "I suggest you review the footage before accusing another poor woman of wanting what you rent for attention." The room went silent. Cassian lowered his eyes, hiding something that looked almost like admiration. Serafina stepped close enough to whisper, "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," Elara whispered back. I think it makes you careless." Then she walked away. But by midnight, the edited video was online. Not the whole scene. Only the part where Elara picked up the diamond bracelet and refused to hand it back immediately. The caption read, "Former charity consultant caught stealing from Meridian donor." By morning, half the city had seen it, and Dorian Blackwell sent Elara one text: "Sign the statement, or the next video will be your mother." Elara did not tell Cassian about the text. That was her first mistake. Her second was going alone to the address Dorian sent. It was a private dining room above a members-only club, the kind of place where the carpet was thick enough to swallow footsteps and the waiters knew not to hear crimes. Dorian was seated at the table with a glass of red wine. No food, just documents. He looked pleased when she entered. "Elara, you always did confuse courage with poor risk assessment." She stayed standing. "Where is the video of my mother?" He lifted a folder. "Sit." "No." His smile thinned. "Still performing strength for an empty room." "There are no empty rooms around men like you, only hidden witnesses." That made him pause. Good. Let him wonder. Elara had learned from Cassian without intending to. Power could be a bluff if delivered with enough calm. Dorian opened the folder. Inside were photographs of Miriam's hospital room, her medication chart, her sleeping face, a nurse leaning over her IV. Elara's stomach turned. "You had someone enter her room." "I have friends in many places." "You mean employees you bought?" "I mean people who understand that loyalty has a price." He slid a document across the table. It was a revised confession. Longer. Worse. If Elara signed it, she would admit to falsifying records, manipulating patient data, and attempting to extort Blackwell assurance after Dorian ended their engagement. It would destroy her. But more than that, it would protect him, because the confession named the fraud, then claimed she invented it. "You are not just trying to silence me," she said. "No," Dorian replied. "I am giving the acquisition clean closure." There it was, the real heartbeat of the crime. The Blackwell family was weeks away from selling Blackwell Assurance to a European medical finance group. Billions were on the table. If systemic denial fraud became public, the sale would collapse. Patients had been denied to inflate margins. Foundation money had been redirected to hide losses. And Elara had become the loose thread. Dorian leaned back. "You always wanted to matter. Congratulations. You are now material risk." Elara looked at the document, then at him. "Did you ever love me?" The question surprised them both. For a second, Dorian's face shifted. Something human appeared. Not love, memory. "I loved what you could have been," he said. "What was that?" "Grateful?" Elara nodded slowly. There it was, the grave marker of their relationship. Not betrayal, not ambition. Gratitude. He had wanted her thankful enough to be owned. She reached for the pen. Dorian watched her with satisfaction. Elara uncapped it. Then she wrote one word across the first page. "No." Dorian's face hardened. "You think this is brave?" "No," she said. "I think it is evidence." She lifted the small recorder from beneath her sleeve. For the first time, Dorian truly lost control. He stood so quickly his chair struck the wall. "You stupid girl!" The door opened behind Elara. Cassian entered. His eyes went first to her, then to the folder, then to Dorian. "You threatened a patient under my protection," Cassian said. Dorian laughed, but it came out wrong. "Your protection? You are a hospital consultant." Cassian walked closer. "No." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I am not." Elara looked at him. Something in Dorian's expression changed from anger to recognition, then to disbelief. "No," Dorian whispered. Cassian removed a card from his coat and placed it on the table. Black, minimal, embossed with silver lettering. Cassian Vale, Chairman, Vale Meridian Health. Elara stared at the card, the words blurred. Chairman, Vale Meridian Health, the hospital, the foundation, the network, her mother's surgery, the denial system, the man who had paid the deposit, the man who had asked for her trust, the man who had watched her cry in the hallways of a hospital he owned. Dorian began to laugh softly. "Oh, Elara," he said. "You did not know?" Cassian looked at her. "Elara!" She stepped back. The recorder was still in her hand, but the victory had vanished. "You own Meridian?" Elara asked. Cassian's silence answered before his mouth did. "Yes." "The hospital?" "Yes." "The foundation?" "Yes." Her hand moved to the bracelet around her wrist. The old plastic suddenly felt heavier than gold. "You saw this on my wrist and knew exactly who I was." Cassian said nothing. "And still you let me ask your name like a stranger. I was afraid of losing you again." "No, Cassian." Her voice sharpened, but her eyes were wet. "You were afraid of giving me the same truth you used to build your empire." He flinched. "Elara! You let me cry in the hallways of a hospital you owned. I was trying to protect you. No, you were deciding how much truth I could survive." Dorian smiled from the corner of the room, pleased by a wound he had not even needed to create. But Elara did not look at him. She looked only at Cassian. "I gave you a name when no one else would write it down," she said, "and you repaid me by hiding yours." That landed harder than anger. Cassian had no defense, because there was none. Elara picked up the recorder and the folder. Then she looked at both men. "I came here to stop one man from controlling my life." Her eyes moved to Cassian. "I did not expect to find two." She walked out before either of them could stop her. And in the silence she left behind, Cassian Vale looked, for the first time in years, like the orphan boy who had lost the only person who ever believed him. Miriam woke fully the next morning. Elara was sitting beside her bed, eyes red, back straight, a stack of files hidden beneath her coat. Miriam looked at her daughter for a long time, then said, "You found him." Elara's throat closed. "You knew?" Miriam turned her eyes toward Elara's wrist. "I knew the boy might become someone. I did not know he would become that." Elara stood and walked to the window. "Why did you never tell me?" "You were 15. You had already lost your scholarship because you defended him. I thought if I buried that night, maybe you could still have a life." Elara laughed softly. "A life?" Miriam closed her eyes. "The Blackwells came to the school after the accusation. They wanted the boy removed quietly. You refused to change your statement. You said you saw the director plant the medicine in his bag. I remember pieces. You were punished for telling the truth." Elara turned. "I lost the scholarship because of him?" "No," Miriam said sharply. "You lost it because adults punished honesty when it embarrassed donors." The words hit harder than comfort. Miriam reached for her hand. "Cassian was a child. So were you. He lied to me. Yes. He owns the system that almost killed you. Yes. Then why do you sound like you are defending him?" "I am not defending the lie. I am defending the boy you once saved from becoming the men who hurt him." Elara looked away. Miriam's voice softened. "Did he save me because he owned the hospital?" "No." "Did he look at you like a man buying gratitude?" Elara said nothing. That was the problem. Cassian had not looked at her like Dorian. Dorian looked at people as assets or threats. Cassian looked at Elara as if she were both wound and witness. But secrecy was still secrecy. Power was still power. And Elara had spent too much of her life being managed by people who claimed they meant well. Miriam squeezed her hand. "What will you do?" Elara looked at the files beneath her coat. "Finish it." "With him?" "No." Miriam smiled faintly. "With yourself Then, Elara leaned down and kissed her mother's forehead. Then she looked at the bracelet on her wrist. The ink was faded, but still visible. Elara, a name written by a girl who had not yet understood that writing names could become a form of war. "Yes," she whispered, "with myself." Then she walked out of the hospital room, alone. Elara spent the next 48 hours doing what everyone had underestimated. She worked, not dramatically, not loudly, not with speeches. She worked like a woman who had survived too many systems to fear another one. She compared denial codes against foundation transfers. She matched cancellation dates with consulting payments. She tracked board signatures. She found that patients marked CBR were not randomly denied. They were selected based on projected treatment cost, legal vulnerability, and likelihood of public attention. The poorest patients were delayed until their cases became medically irreversible. Then the foundation closed their files as non-actionable. After that, unused grant money was moved to advisory contracts. Those contracts led to shell consultancies. Those consultancies led to Blackwell-controlled accounts. And Serafina Cross's honorary medical fund sat at the center of the laundering structure, like a pearl on a knife. Elara did not need Cassian to find it. He had opened the door, but she walked through it herself. On the second night, a junior accountant named Mara Devlin appeared at Elara's apartment with a flash drive hidden inside a lipstick tube. She was 26, terrified, and wearing the expression of someone who had been paid to ignore numbers until the numbers became ghosts. "I cannot testify," Mara said. "They will destroy me." Elara let her in. "I am not asking you to be brave." Mara's eyes filled. "Then what are you asking?" "To be accurate." That Mara could do. Together, they built the timeline. 12 patient deaths, 28 delayed surgeries, $46 million redirected, 3 board members compromised, 1 acquisition built on fraud, and 1 gala scheduled for Saturday night, where Blackwell Assurance would celebrate its sale in front of donors, press, investors, and hospital leadership. Dorian would be there. Serafina would be there. Cassian would be there. Every person who had used charity as a mask would be standing beneath chandeliers, applauding themselves for their compassion. Elara knew exactly where the truth needed to happen. Not in a courtroom, not first. Courtrooms came later, when lawyers tried to make crimes sound complicated. The first trial needed witnesses, donors, cameras, families. The first trial needed shame. On Saturday afternoon, Cassian came to her apartment. She did not invite him in. He stood in the hallway, holding himself like a man prepared to be refused. "Elara, no. You do not know what I came to say. I know what powerful men sound like when they believe timing makes them noble." He lowered his eyes. "Fair. I should have told you. Yes. I was investigating Meridian from inside. I did not know who I could trust. You trusted me enough to use what I knew." His jaw tightened. "I trusted you more than I trusted myself." That almost broke through. Almost. Elara gripped the door. "Do you know what the worst part is?" He looked at her. "For one moment," she said, "I thought I had finally met someone who helped without needing control." Cassian absorbed that like a sentence. "I did not come to stop you." "Good. I came to warn you. Dorian knows about Mara." Elara went still. "How?" "He has someone watching your building." She turned toward the living room. Mara was asleep on the sofa, one hand still closed around the flash drive. Elara looked back at Cassian. What did he plan? To leak her psychiatric records and claim she fabricated the files during a breakdown. Elara felt a cold anger rise. Not hot, not frantic, clean. "Can you stop him?" "Yes." "Legally?" Cassian paused. "Mostly." Despite everything, she almost smiled. Then she opened the door wider. Not forgiveness, strategy. Mara leaves through the service exit in 10 minutes, Elara said. You get her somewhere safe, no press, no visible security, no men in suits at her door. Cassian nodded. And you? He asked. Elara looked down at the blue bracelet on her wrist, then back at him. I am going to the gala. Cassian's face hardened. They will be waiting for you. I know. They will try to humiliate you before you speak. No. They will cut your microphone. Then I will make sure they want to hear me before they know they should stop me. For the first time, Cassian's control cracked enough for admiration to show openly. I loved you first as the girl who saved me, he said, quietly. But I think I fear you now as the woman who learned to save herself. Elara held his gaze. Good. Then she closed the door, and Cassian Vale, billionaire owner of the hospital empire, obeyed her. The Meridian Winter Benefit was designed to make wealth look holy. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, white roses, violin music, and champagne served in glasses too delicate for the hands that had funded them. On the stage, a silver sign read, "A New Era of Compassionate Care." Beneath it stood Dorian Blackwell, smiling for photographers beside Serafina Cross. They looked perfect together, two beautiful heirs of polished cruelty. Dorian wore black tie and confidence. Serafina wore emerald satin and diamonds, including the bracelet she had once tried to frame Elara for stealing. When Elara entered, conversation stopped in small waves. She wore a simple navy dress, no diamonds, no escort, no visible fear, only the old blue hospital bracelet around her wrist. Someone whispered her name. Someone else lifted a phone. Serafina saw her first. Her smile bloomed, not friendly, hungry. She crossed the ballroom with slow elegance. Elara, she said loudly enough for nearby donors to hear. How brave of you to come after everything. Elara looked at the chandeliers. It is amazing what people hang above themselves when they are afraid of looking down. Serafina's eyes narrowed. Dorian joined them. Elara, he said softly, this is not the place. For fraud? For desperation, she smiled. There it is. I wondered how long you could pretend to be civilized. A photographer moved closer. Dorian noticed. His voice softened into performance. We are all concerned for you. Your mother's illness, your recent behavior, your association with unstable employees. Elara tilted her head. You rehearsed that. Serafina stepped in. What Dorian means is that grief can make women imagine conspiracies. Elara looked at her. And greed can make them fund them. The air changed. Dorian's hand tightened around his glass. Elara, he warned, but she was already moving toward the stage. A foundation director blocked her. This program is scheduled. Elara smiled. So were the surgeries. She stepped around him. By the time she reached the microphone, the room was murmuring. Dorian turned to security. Remove her. Elara tapped the microphone once. The sound echoed through the ballroom. Every conversation died. Good evening, she said. Her voice was calm. That was why people listened. My name is Elara Voss. Some of you know me as a former clinic administrator. Some of you know me as the woman accused last week of stealing a bracelet from Serafina Cross. A ripple moved through the crowd. Serafina smiled as if pitying her. Elara looked at her. For clarity, the full security footage has already been sent to every major donor in this room. You may watch it during dessert. Serafina's smile weakened. But I am not here tonight about a bracelet, Elara continued. I am here about 12 dead patients, 28 delayed surgeries, and $46 million in redirected medical relief funds. The ballroom froze. Dorian stepped toward the stage. Cut the microphone. A technician reached for the board. Then a voice came from the side of the ballroom. Do not cut her microphone. Cassian Vale walked into the light. Not as a consultant, not as a security observer, as himself. The whispers began instantly. Cassian Vale, chairman of Vale Meridian Health, owner of the hospital network, the invisible power behind the foundation. Dorian's face drained of color. Serafina stopped breathing for half a second. Cassian did not take the stage. He stood beneath it, looking up at Elara. "For the first time tonight," he said, "someone on that stage is telling the truth." Then he stepped back. He did not rescue her. He gave her the room. Elara understood the apology in that choice. And she continued. "They did not erase patients by killing them in public," she said. "They erased them quietly, with codes, with delays, with forms no family could obtain, with polite words like administrative consideration. But every code had a name behind it. Every delay had a mother behind it. Every missing form had a child waiting for someone powerful enough to care." The screen behind her lit up. The first code appeared, CBR 194, then another, CBR 207, then another, CBR 228. Cold classifications, administrative ghosts. Elara turned back to the room. "That is what they gave people. Codes, numbers, risk categories." Then she touched the old blue bracelet on her wrist. 12 years ago, I learned what powerful people do when someone poor becomes inconvenient." She removed the bracelet. "They do not always destroy them loudly. Sometimes they simply refuse to write their name down." The room quieted. That night, a hungry boy was accused of stealing medicine from a charity school. The adults in charge wanted him removed quietly because scandal made generosity look bad. Cassian stood below the stage, completely still. Elara's voice softened, but did not weaken. "They refused to write his name in the report. They refused to let him be a child. They made him a problem." She lifted the bracelet. "So I wrote one." A murmur moved through the room. Elara turned the bracelet over. On the back, faded almost to nothing, was her own name. Elara. "I kept this because I did not understand then what I understand now. Names are the first thing powerful systems take when they want to make people disappear." Cassian stepped onto the stage. Slowly, he removed a second bracelet from his pocket. The room went silent. It was old, blue, faded. On the back, in fragile ink, was one word. Cass. Cassian held it up. "This was the first record that said I existed," he said. "It was not issued by a hospital. It was given by a girl who refused to let donors erase a child." He looked at Elara. "She gave me a name before anyone gave me approval." Elara turned back to the donors, board members, investors, and cameras. "And that is what this hospital forgot." The screen changed. Patient codes disappeared. Names appeared. Jonas Bell, age 54. Denied transplant review after charity-based risk classification. Amelia Torres, age 7. Surgery delayed twice due to impossible documentation. Requirements. Ruth Klein, age 68. Cancer grant deferred until file closure after death. Samuel Price, age 42. Removed from transplant review after administrative consideration. Nadia Reeves, age 31. Denied cardiac trial funding despite foundation approval. One after another. Names replacing codes. Elara let each name sit in the room. No music, no dramatic gesture, just names. The kind of names systems tried to bury beneath codes. "The hospital gave patients codes," Elara said. She looked at Cassian's bracelet. "Tonight we give them names." Dorian mounted the stage. "This is defamatory. She has no authority to present confidential information." "These families gave consent," Elara said. He stopped. At that exact moment, the side doors opened. One by one, families entered the ballroom. A mother holding a framed photograph of her son. A widower carrying folded medical bills. A mechanic leaning on a cane. And Miriam Voss in a wheelchair, pushed by Mara Devlin. Elara nearly broke when she saw her mother. but Miriam lifted her chin. Continue. So Elara did. Blackwell Assurance identified financially vulnerable patients as low litigation risk. Their treatment was delayed, denied, or redirected while money assigned to their care was moved through consulting agreements. The screen changed. Foundation grants, consulting contracts, Blackwell subsidiaries, Cross Medical Futures. Serafina Cross's name appeared at the bottom. Tia's ballroom erupted. Serafina stepped back. This is absurd, Elara turned to her. Your signature appears on 12 advisory approvals. I chair ceremonial committees. I do not review transfers. No, Elara said. You approve them and call it philanthropy. Dorian grabbed the microphone. This woman is unstable. Her mother is ill. Her judgment is compromised. Elara faced him. My mother is ill because your company found a way to make dying look like paperwork. The room went silent. Even Dorian had no answer. Then Cassian's legal counsel entered, with 2 federal investigators and an independent audit team. Dorian looked toward the exits. For the first time, he understood. The gala was not the exposure. It was the trap. Cassian had frozen internal access. Mara had testified under protection. The acquisition group had been notified before the champagne was poured. The investors had been watching the entire presentation from a private live feed. And Elara had made sure the families were the first faces the room saw before anyone could reduce them to numbers. Cassian stepped forward. As of tonight, he said, Vale Meridian Health is freezing all accounts connected to the Meridian Relief Foundation, pending independent investigation. Blackwell Assurance's acquisition review is suspended. Every patient file marked under charity-based risk will be reopened. Every denial will be reviewed by an external medical ethics board. Dorian whispered. You cannot do this. Cassian looked at him. I own the system you used. Then he looked at Elara, and she found the truth inside it. Elara took the microphone again. One more thing. The room quieted. The Meridian Relief Foundation will no longer be governed by donors who use sick people as decorations for their reputations. A murmur spread. The board will be dissolved pending investigation. Patient Review Authority will be transferred to an independent office. Cassian looked at the board. And if she accepts, Elara Voss will become the first independent director of patient review, with full authority to reopen every denied case. The room erupted, not all applause, some outrage, some fear, some relief. But Elara heard only one sound, Miriam crying softly from the front row. Dorian tried to leave. Federal investigators stopped him near the exit. Serafina removed her diamond bracelet with trembling hands, as if it had suddenly become evidence. The acquisition representatives walked out without speaking to the Blackwells. Within minutes, the news alerts began. Blackwell Assurance sales suspended. Meridian Relief Foundation under investigation. Hospital denial scandal exposed at gala. And by midnight, the phrase Dorian had used against Elara became the headline that destroyed him. Pride is expensive. Only this time, he was the one who could not afford it. 3 weeks later, Miriam Voss walked slowly through the rehabilitation garden with a cane in one hand and Elara's arm in the other. The city was cold, but bright. Miriam complained about the soup, the nurses, the physical therapist, and the fact that everyone now treated her like glass. Elara listened to every complaint like music. Dorian Blackwell had resigned from the board before being formally removed. His family's acquisition collapsed. Blackwell Assurance was under investigation for fraud, obstruction, and patient harm. Serafina Cross lost her honorary positions within 48 hours. Her family released a statement about accountability, distance, and cooperation, which was old money language for abandoning the burning room. Mara Devlin entered witness protection under a financial crimes agreement and later sent Elara a postcard with no return address. On the front was a beach. On the back, only 2 words, still accurate, And Cassian Vale had done exactly what Elara demanded. He stayed beside the investigation, not in front of it. He appointed external auditors. He opened patient records to review. He funded emergency treatment without placing his name on the announcements. And he did not ask Elara to forgive him. That mattered. Forgiveness demanded too early was just another form of control. On the 22nd day, Elara found him in the old archive room. He was standing beside the table where they had once spread the rejected patient files. This time, there were no denial forms, no audit trails, no codes, only 2 old blue bracelets lying side by side, his and hers, Cass, Elara, 2 names that had survived 12 years of silence. Elara stopped at the doorway. "You brought them here?" Cassian nodded. "This room is where we learned what the system had done with names," he said. "It felt right to bring back the first 2 it failed to erase." Elara walked closer. For a while, neither of them spoke. The bracelets looked small on the table, almost fragile. It seemed impossible that something so light had carried so much. Cassian touched his bracelet with one finger. "The first time, you wrote my name because no one else would." Then he placed a blank white hospital bracelet beside the 2 blue ones. "This time, I want you to write yours because no one will ever erase it again." Elara looked at him. There was no performance in his face, no control, no rescue, only apology and faith. She picked up the pen. On the bracelet, she wrote, "Elara Voss." Then, underneath it, "Not charity, authority." Cassian read the words and smiled quietly. "That sounds like a policy. It sounds like a warning. To whom?" Elara looked through the archive window toward the hospital lights. "To anyone who thinks paperwork can bury people." Cassian reached into his coat pocket. Elara glanced at him. "Careful. It is not what you think." He opened his hand. Inside was a small velvet box. Elara raised an eyebrow. "That is exactly what women mean when they say, 'It is what I think.'" Cassian gave the faintest smile. "I am not asking you to forgive me quickly. Good. I am not asking to stand in front of you. Better." He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring. Wrapped around the band was a thin blue thread taken from neither bracelet, but matched to both. "I loved you first as the girl who saved me," he said. "But I love you now as the woman who did not wait for me to save her." Elara looked at the ring, then at the 2 bracelets, then at the new one bearing her full name. For a moment, the girl she had been stood beside the woman she had become. The girl who wrote Cass because no one else would. The woman who wrote Elara Voss because no one would ever take that authority from her again. She closed the box gently. Cassian's face fell. "No," she said. He went still. Then she took his hand. "Not yet." Hope returned to his eyes carefully. Elara stepped closer. "You do not get to stand in front of me again." "I know." She laced her fingers through his. "You stand beside me." Cassian bowed his head over her hand. "Always." On the archive table, 3 bracelets remained beneath the hospital lights. One for the boy who had almost been erased. One for the girl who refused to let it happen. And one for the woman who finally wrote her own name. Not as a patient. Not as a risk. Not as charity, but as authority. The hospital gave patients codes. Elara gave them names. And from that night forward, every locked door in Vale Meridian Health opened under a rule written in her own hand. No patient would ever disappear behind a code again.